Men haven't gone cold, they've woken up. Not from heartbreak, but from clarity. They've watched too many promises fade, behind a late-night message. Now they know love no longer guarantees loyalty because betrayal today doesn't need touch, only attention. Something has changed. Men don't get angry anymore, they get quiet. They don't chase forever, they protect their peace. This isn't bitterness, it's evolution. Because once a man sees how easily love bends under temptation, he stops believing in words and starts trusting patterns. The awakening of men. There's a quiet realization spreading among men, not born from bitterness, not from heartbreak, but from something far deeper, from clarity, from years of silent observation, of watching patterns repeat themselves until the truth became impossible to ignore. It's not anger that drives this shift, it's awareness. A kind of awakening that doesn't happen overnight, but slowly, like dawn creeping across the horizon after a long, dark night. Men have started to see the truth. They've seen enough to understand that no matter how loving or loyal some women may appear, we now live in an age where faithfulness has become negotiable, where loyalty bends under the pressure of attention, validation, and convenience. And for the first time in history, men are not reacting with rage. They're reacting with distance. They're not arguing. They're not begging. They're simply withdrawing, quietly, intentionally, and completely. You can feel it everywhere if you pay attention. In the tone of conversations that once sounded hopeful, but now end with an indifferent shrug. In relationships that once promised forever, but now come with invisible expiration dates written into the fine print of modern romance. In the way men no longer speak about love as destiny, but as a temporary condition, one that can vanish the moment attention shifts elsewhere. It's not that men have stopped loving women, it's that they've stopped believing that love guarantees loyalty. Because they've seen what happens behind the curtain, the hidden messages, the deleted texts, the just friends excuses, the slow emotional drift that always comes before betrayal. They've watched too many smiles fade into indifference, too many promises dissolve into silence, too many hearts broken not by confrontation, but by quiet neglect. The kind that feels colder than rage, more final than words. Men aren't naive anymore. They've learned to read between the lines, to trust their intuition when something feels off. They've learned that in this modern world, loyalty doesn't die loudly. It dies quietly, unseen, with just one scroll, one like, one late-night message that crosses an invisible line. They've realized that the smallest things, the glance that lingers, the reply that comes too quickly, the laugh that feels too personal, all mean something. Because in the world of constant digital connection, emotional fidelity has become the new battlefield. Men have also realized something else, that distance is now their defense, that silence speaks louder than confrontation, that walking away in peace hurts far less than staying to prove a point to someone who has already checked out emotionally. This awakening isn't about hatred or revenge, it's about evolution. It's about men understanding that love, in its modern form, can no longer be treated as sacred by default. It has to be earned, proven, and maintained. Once upon a time, loyalty was a principle. Today, it's an option. And that's why men have stopped romanticizing forever. They no longer dream of being her everything. They've learned that in a world full of distractions, even the most devoted heart can wonder if discipline isn't part of love. So men are changing. They're growing quieter, colder on the surface, but calmer within. They've traded emotional chaos for composure, desperation for discernment. They've learned that protecting peace is more valuable than chasing connection. And beneath that calm, there's a truth that few will ever admit. Most men didn't become detached because they stopped caring. They became detached because they cared too much, for too long, and watched that care be taken for granted. Now they no longer react. They observe. They no longer chase words. They study patterns. They no longer fight to be understood. They walk away when they're not respected. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. The kind that only comes from heartbreak, reflection, and survival. So when you see a man who's quiet, distant, and unmoved, don't mistake it for emptiness. That silence is filled with understanding. It's the sound of someone who's seen too much, learned too much, and finally chosen himself. This is the new era of men, not bitter, but awake, not cold, but clear, not broken, but reborn. The new betrayal doesn't always involve bodies. It involves attention. It doesn't always happen in secret places. Sometimes it happens right in front of you, on a screen, dressed as innocence. She'll say, "It's just a like, it's just a friend." But every man who has ever loved deeply knows, attention is energy, and energy is the currency of connection. Once she gives that energy elsewhere, something subtle begins to die between them. Not instantly, quietly. Like a flame losing air, it still glows for a moment, then fades before you even notice it's gone. Loyalty isn't tested in grand moments of temptation, it's tested in the smallest, most forgettable ones. In the compliment she chooses to entertain. In the message she could ignore but doesn't. In the conversation she hides behind the shield of privacy. It's tested in those quiet digital exchanges where nothing seems dangerous, but everything begins to change. Men have come to realize something that used to be whispered but is now understood. It's not that women cheat more, it's that they hide it better, justify it smoother, and move on faster. Their betrayals aren't always physical. They're emotional, psychological, spiritual. The kind that doesn't leave bruises but still scars the soul. The modern world has given birth to a new kind of infidelity, one that hides behind dopamine. The endless scrolling, the validation loop, the micro-flirting that feels harmless but drains intimacy one notification at a time. We live in a world where loyalty is not lost in hotel rooms but in comment sections and private chats, where emotional attention, once sacred, is now divided among strangers, followers, and digital admirers. And men feel it. They might not always say it, but they sense the shift, in tone, in warmth, in energy. They notice when her smile is no longer reserved for them, when her laughter sounds practiced, when her eyes glow for a screen more than for a soul. Faithfulness isn't guaranteed by love or vows. It never was. It's a daily choice, a discipline, and too many stopped choosing it long ago. Because in this new era, temptation is infinite, and discipline is rare. Every day presents a new test, a message, a memory, an opportunity to feel desired again. And people mistake that feeling for freedom. They call it harmless interaction. They call it empowerment. But what it really is emotional leakage. Tiny cracks that appear long before the break. And once attention starts to wander, commitment begins to rot quietly beneath the surface. That's why modern love feels fragile, because it's built in an environment where options are infinite and focus is fleeting, where one small dose of validation can eclipse years of loyalty, where people crave excitement more than consistency. And men, they've learned to see the pattern. They've seen the likes that mean more than they should, the late replies that come with excuses, the phone flipped upside down during dinner, the distance that grows in silence. They've stopped pretending not to notice. They've stopped asking questions that only earn gaslighting in return. They've realized that in this world, loyalty is not broken by accident, it's surrendered by choice. The tragedy of modern relationships isn't that people stop loving each other. It's that they forget how to guard what they love. They let the world in, one message, one emoji, one little secret at a time, until the bond that once felt unshakable becomes paper thin. And when the truth finally surfaces, it's never just about cheating. It's about how easily she could act normal while drifting away. How effortlessly she could smile while her attention belonged elsewhere. How convincingly she could play loyal while already halfway gone. That realization changes a man. It doesn't make him hateful, it makes him careful. It doesn't make him cold, it makes him aware. Because once a man has seen how quietly loyalty can die, he never looks at innocent attention the same way again. He begins to understand that infidelity doesn't always start with desire, it starts with distraction. And that's the cruel irony of the modern world. Everyone wants love, but few are willing to protect it. Everyone speaks of loyalty, but few practice restraint. Everyone wants deep connection, but keeps one foot in the world of endless validation. So men evolve. They stop expecting loyalty to come naturally. They start reading tone, not text. Behavior, not promises. They watch consistency, not captions. They understand that true faithfulness isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible, and proven only when no one's watching. Because real loyalty isn't built in words or posts. It's built in choices. The choices you make when temptation whispers. The choices you make when nobody would ever find out. And in a time when even love has become performative, those who still practice restraint, those who still protect something sacred, have become rare. That's why men are no longer angry when they see disloyalty. They're simply done. Done chasing what doesn't value depth. Done explaining why loyalty matters. Done mistaking attention for affection. Because in the end, a man doesn't leave when he stops loving. He leaves when he realizes that love alone can't survive in a world that's forgotten the meaning of loyalty. The collapse of meaning. Today, infidelity no longer wears the mask of betrayal. It wears the language of emotion. It hides behind soft phrases designed to sound spiritual, evolved, even justified. It's not cheating, I was just unhappy. I didn't feel seen. I needed to find myself. Once upon a time, those words would have been confessions. Now they're rationalizations. Because in a culture where feelings define truth, anything can be excused, even disloyalty. Philosophers warned us centuries ago, when emotion becomes the compass, morality becomes flexible. When desire becomes sacred, discipline becomes outdated. When how I feel replaces what is right, then betrayal doesn't look like betrayal anymore, it looks like self-expression. And that's where the collapse began. Faithfulness and happiness are not the same thing. Loyalty was never about pleasure, it was about principle. It was about the quiet strength of honoring something beyond emotion, a commitment that outlasted moods, moments, and temptation. But in the modern world, where everything revolves around how I feel right now, principle no longer holds power. We've redefined love into a transaction of comfort. If you make me feel good, I'll stay. If you challenge me, bore me, or trigger me, I'll call it outgrowing you. We no longer fall out of love, we fall out of convenience. That's what men are mourning, not lost women but lost values. Not broken relationships, but a broken foundation of meaning itself. Because the kind of faithfulness that once survived distance and desire, the kind that held on through storms, loneliness, and temptation, has become rare. The kind of woman who protects love even when no one's watching is treated like an anomaly, not a standard. The world has become emotionally fluent but morally illiterate. We know how to express everything, but we no longer know how to endure anything. We know how to talk about boundaries and self-love, but not about accountability and duty. We celebrate independence, but forget that real connection requires surrender. So men adapt, not out of bitterness, out of recognition. They commit slower, test longer, trust less. They've learned that words are easy, promises are cheap, and meaning is fragile. They've seen too many declarations of love vanish under pressure. Too many forevers end with silence and blame disguised as healing. They've learned that time is the only truth teller. That loyalty doesn't need loud words. It needs quiet consistency. And that trust must now be earned not through emotion, but through evidence. This is the new world, where affection is abundant, but integrity is extinct. Where people crave intensity more than stability. Where emotional connection has replaced moral commitment. Where everyone speaks of authenticity, yet lives behind masks of impulse and self-interest. Men have started to see the illusion for what it is. They've realized that the collapse of meaning isn't just happening in relationships. It's happening in everything. In how we love, how we speak, how we promise. We live in a time where even the word loyalty has lost its weight, used casually, felt rarely, practiced almost never. And so, men evolve again. They begin to seek not beauty, but depth, not chemistry, but character, not connection that feels good, but connection that endures. Because once a man has been burned by false meaning, by words that sounded sacred but were hollow inside, he no longer craves excitement. He craves peace. He no longer looks for perfection. He looks for principle. And that's the quiet revolution no one is talking about. Men aren't rejecting love. They're rejecting illusions. They're not avoiding commitment. They're avoiding counterfeit connection. They're not becoming cold. They're becoming conscious. Because in a world where loyalty bends to convenience, where emotions dictate ethics, and where self-love often disguises selfishness, meaning itself has collapsed. And when meaning collapses, so does everything built upon it. Love becomes fleeting, promises become performances, people become replaceable. That's the world we live in now, a place where everyone is searching for something real in a culture that rewards, but some men still remember. They remember what it meant to stand by something sacred, to love with discipline, not just emotion, to choose devotion over desire. And though the world may call them outdated, they are the ones who carry the last spark of meaning, a reminder that love without principle isn't love at all. Because in the end, it's not loyalty that died, it's meaning that did. And without meaning, no loyalty can survive. The rise of solitude. Betrayal doesn't just break a man's heart, it rewires his belief system. It burns away the illusions he once built his world upon. It teaches him that not every "I love you" is a promise, and not every hand that touches you intends to stay. A man who's been betrayed doesn't just lose someone. He loses the version of himself that still believed in blind faith. And in that loss, something new is born: awareness. He begins to see that peace is worth more than pride, that silence can heal faster than explanation, that walking away before losing himself isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Men have learned that loyalty cannot be begged for, negotiated, or performed. It must be freely given, or it isn't real, because love without loyalty is just attention-wearing perfume. So they stop chasing explanations that only twist the knife deeper. They stop proving their worth to those who never saw it. They stop gambling their peace on promises that come with expiration dates. They're not bitter, they're awake, not hateful, just clear. They no longer confuse attachment with love or intensity with depth. They've seen the difference between someone who values them and someone who only values the attention they provide. And in that clarity, men are rediscovering something sacred: solitude. Because solitude isn't loneliness, it's freedom. It's the place where a man rebuilds his foundation brick by brick, without noise, without validation, without anyone watching. It's where he learns that peace isn't found in someone else's arms, it's found in the quiet strength of his own mind. Once he understands that, everything changes. The world stops feeling empty and starts feeling clear. He realizes he doesn't need constant communication to feel connected or constant attention to feel alive. He doesn't seek closure from others, he gives it to himself. He learns that the man who respects himself will never beg for half love. He'll never settle for conditional loyalty or temporary devotion. He'll never chase validation from a world addicted to distraction. Because he knows now, love that must be chased is already lost. He no longer runs toward warmth that flickers. He sits within the flame he built himself. He no longer explains his silence. He embodies it. Because the strongest men no longer prove, they choose. This rise of solitude isn't isolation, it's evolution. It's the quiet rebellion of men who have chosen self-respect over self-sacrifice. They no longer measure love by intensity, but by integrity. They no longer give endlessly hoping to be seen. They give carefully, discerning who's worthy of their peace. And though the world may call them detached, they are more connected than ever, to truth, to purpose, to themselves. Because once a man has met the silence within and made peace with it, he becomes untouchable. You can no longer manipulate him with absence, tempt him with validation, or control him with guilt. He's tasted solitude and found it sweeter than compromise. He no longer craves the crowd, he craves clarity. He no longer fears being alone, he fears losing himself again. He no longer falls for words, he studies actions. This is the quiet transformation the world doesn't talk about, the unseen renaissance of men who are done begging for respect in places that never offered it. They're not angry, they're awake. They've stopped arguing with the unfaithful, stopped trying to be understood by the shallow. They simply walk away, not out of defeat, but out of dignity. Because solitude has shown them something love rarely did: peace without condition. And one day, when the noise fades and the world of distractions crumbles under its own weight, every unfaithful heart will realize the truth too late. Loyalty was never weakness, it was wealth. And the men who walked alone weren't lonely, they were free. Because in the modern world, loyalty has become the rarest luxury, and solitude the purest form of strength.